In the third year of King Jehoiakim's reign over Judah, Babylon's powerful king, Nebuchadnezzar, marched against Jerusalem. The city fell, and the Lord allowed sacred items from God's temple to be taken and placed in the treasury of Babylon's false gods. Along with these treasures, young men from Judah's royal family and nobility were captured and carried into exile. The king ordered his chief official, Ashpenaz, to select the finest young men, strong, intelligent, handsome, and well-educated. These captives were to be trained for 3 years in the language, literature, and customs of Babylon so they could serve in the king's court. They were given food and wine from the royal table and new Babylonian names. Among them were 4 young men from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Their names were changed to Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, honoring Babylonian gods. But Daniel made a firm decision in his heart. He would not defile himself with the king's food and wine. He respectfully asked the official for permission to eat only vegetables and drink water. Though the official feared the king's punishment, God caused him to show favor to Daniel. A test was proposed: 10 days of a simple diet. At the end of those 10 days, Daniel and his friends looked healthier and stronger than all the others who ate the royal food. So their diet remained simple. God blessed the 4 young men with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Daniel was also given the ability to interpret dreams and visions. After 3 years, they were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar. He found no one wiser than Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were appointed to serve in the royal court, and in every matter of wisdom, the king found them 10 times better than all his advisors. And so Daniel remained in Babylon, faithful to God, even in a foreign land. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon was shaken by troubling dreams. Night after night, his sleep fled from him. Though the dream burned in his mind, its meaning remained hidden, and his spirit was deeply disturbed. Desperate for answers, the king summoned the wisest men of his empire: magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and counselors. When they stood before him, he made an impossible demand. "I have had a dream, and my mind is troubled. Tell me what the dream was, and tell me its meaning." The wise men asked the king to tell them the dream first, and then they would interpret it. But Nebuchadnezzar, suspecting deceit, refused. "If you cannot tell me the dream and its meaning," he warned, "you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be destroyed. But if you tell me the dream, I will reward you with gifts, honor, and riches." Again they pleaded, saying that no man on earth could do such a thing. Only the gods could reveal mysteries like this, and they did not dwell among humans. The king's patience vanished. In furious anger, Nebuchadnezzar issued a decree that all the wise men of Babylon were to be put to death. The order spread quickly through the city. Soldiers were sent out to carry out the executions. Among those marked for death were Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. When the captain of the guard came for them, Daniel spoke with wisdom and calm. He asked why the decree was so urgent. After hearing what had happened, Daniel requested time to seek an answer from the God of heaven. The king granted him a brief delay. That night, Daniel went to his friends and urged them to pray for mercy from God, asking him to reveal the mystery so they would not perish with the rest of Babylon's wise men. And God answered. In a vision during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel. Immediately, Daniel praised the God of heaven. "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power belong to him. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who understand. He reveals deep and hidden things." At once, Daniel went to the captain of the guard and said, "Do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret the dream for him." Daniel was brought before Nebuchadnezzar. The king asked, "Are you able to tell me the dream I had and explain it?" Daniel answered humbly, "No wise man, magician, or astrologer can do what the king asks. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown you what will happen in days to come." Then Daniel described the dream. "O king, you looked, and before you stood a great statue, mighty and dazzling, terrifying in appearance. Its head was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly clay. As you watched, a stone was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and shattered them. Then the iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold were all crushed together and became like dust on a threshing floor. The wind carried them away, and no trace of them remained. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." The king listened in silence. The dream had been spoken exactly as he had seen it. Then Daniel gave the interpretation. "You, O king, are the king of kings. God has given you power, strength, and glory. You're the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Then a third kingdom of bronze will rule over the earth. After that, a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, will crush and break all others. But the kingdom will be divided, like iron mixed with clay. Some parts will be strong and others weak. They will not remain united. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will not be left to another people. It will crush all other kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself stand forever." Daniel concluded, "The dream is true, and its meaning is certain." Then the mighty king of Babylon fell face down before Daniel. He ordered that offerings and incense be presented to him, and said, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries." Nebuchadnezzar rewarded Daniel with great honor. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief over all the wise men. At Daniel's request, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were appointed to positions of authority as well. And Daniel remained at the king's court, faithful to God, standing as a servant in the center of a powerful empire. In the height of his power and glory, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon commanded a massive golden image to be built, an overwhelming statue rising 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. It stood upon the wide plain of Dura, gleaming beneath the sun as a symbol of the king's authority and the might of his empire. When the statue was finished, the king sent word throughout all Babylon. Governors, princes, judges, treasurers, counselors, magistrates, and rulers from every province were summoned to attend its grand dedication. The plain filled with leaders and officials from every corner of the empire, standing before the towering golden image. A herald stepped forward and cried out with a loud voice, "People of every nation and language, this is the command of King Nebuchadnezzar. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the golden image the king has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." The musicians lifted their instruments. The music rang across the plain. At once, the great crowd bowed low in obedience, faces to the ground before the shining statue. But not everyone bowed. Among the thousand stood 3 young men from Judah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. While the world around them knelt to a false god, they remained standing, loyal to the God of Israel. Some Babylonian officials noticed. They came forward and accused the 3 men before the king. "O king, live forever," they said. "You issued a decree that everyone must worship the golden image when the music plays. But there are 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you appointed over Babylon. They pay no attention to you, O king. They do not serve your gods or worship the image you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was filled with rage. He ordered the 3 men brought before him. His voice thundered as he spoke. "Is it true that you do not worship my gods or my golden image? I will give you one more chance. When the music plays, bow down. But if you do not, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" The 3 men stood calm and fearless. "O Nebuchadnezzar," they answered, "we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Our God is able to save us from the furnace and from your hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know that we will never serve your gods or worship your golden image." Their words struck the king like fire. His face twisted with fury. He commanded the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The flames roared and leapt high into the air. The heat shimmered across the plain. The king ordered his strongest soldiers to bind the 3 men in their robes, cloaks, and turbans. They were tied tightly and dragged toward the blazing furnace. As the soldiers approached the opening, the heat became unbearable. The flames burst outward, and the mighty soldiers were struck down by the fire. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the furnace, still bound. Then, in the midst of the roaring flames, something miraculous happened. King Nebuchadnezzar jumped to his feet in astonishment. "Did we not throw 3 men in the fire?" he demanded. "Yes, O king," his advisors replied. "Look," he cried, "I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." The king rushed to the furnace opening and called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." The 3 men walked out of the fire before the watching crowd. The officials gathered around them in awe. They examined their bodies. Not a single hair was burned. Their clothes were untouched. There was no smell of smoke upon them. The fire had not harmed them at all. Nebuchadnezzar lifted his voice before the entire assembly. "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego," he declared. He sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command. No other god can save in this way. Then the king issued a new decree. Anyone who spoke against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be punished, for there was no other god who could rescue like this. And the king promoted the 3 men to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. So the golden statue still stood on the plain of Dura, but the power of God had been revealed before an empire, and 3 faithful servants had proven that obedience to God is stronger than the fire of any king. King Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of the great Babylonian Empire, sent a message to all nations and peoples of every language throughout the world. He proclaimed peace and declared that he wished to tell of the mighty signs and wonders the Most High God had done for him. The king spoke of God's greatness, saying that his kingdom is everlasting and his dominion endures from generation to generation. Then Nebuchadnezzar told his story. He had been living in peace and prosperity in his palace, powerful and secure. But one night, he had a dream that filled him with fear. The visions troubled him deeply, and his spirit was shaken. Once again, the king summoned the wise men of Babylon, magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners, and demanded that they interpret the dream. But none of them could explain its meaning. At last, Daniel was brought before him, the man whom the king called Belteshazzar, named after a Babylonian god, but known as a servant of the Most High God. The king trusted that the spirit of the holy God lived in him. Nebuchadnezzar told Daniel the dream. He had seen a great tree in the middle of the earth. The tree was tall and strong, reaching up to the heavens and visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and it provided food for all. The animals found shelter beneath it, and the birds lived in its branches. All living creatures were fed from it. Then the king saw a holy messenger coming down from heaven. The messenger cried out loudly, "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches. Strip its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee and the birds leave its branches. But leave the stump bound with iron and bronze among the grass of the field. Let him live like the beasts of the field and be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let his mind be changed from that of a man and given the mind of an animal, until 7 times pass over him." The messenger declared that this judgment was decreed by heaven, so that all the living might know that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he chooses. The dream ended. Daniel stood silent for a moment, deeply troubled by what he had heard. The king noticed his concern and urged him not to let the dream or its meaning alarm him. Then Daniel spoke. He explained that the great tree represented the king himself, strong, powerful, and known throughout the earth. But the command to cut down the tree meant that Nebuchadnezzar would be driven from human society and would live like a wild animal. He would eat grass like cattle and be soaked with the dew of heaven. His sanity would be taken from him until 7 periods of time passed, and he would learn that the Most High God rules over all kingdoms. Yet Daniel also brought hope. The stump that was left in the ground meant that the kingdom would be restored to Nebuchadnezzar once he acknowledged God's authority. Daniel urged the king to repent, to turn away from his sins, and to show mercy to the poor. He warned that this might delay the coming judgment. For a time, Nebuchadnezzar continued in his greatness. 12 months later, as the king walked on the roof of his royal palace, he looked out over Babylon and spoke with pride. "Is not this the great Babylon I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" While the words were still on his lips, a voice from heaven answered him. "O King Nebuchadnezzar, your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he chooses." Immediately, the judgment fell. Nebuchadnezzar was driven away from human society. He lived in the fields, ate grass like an animal, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven. His hair grew long like eagle's feathers, and his nails became like birds' claws. 7 periods of time passed. At the end of that time, Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes toward heaven. His sanity was restored, and his understanding returned. He praised the Most High and honored the eternal King. He declared that God's dominion is everlasting, that all the peoples of the earth are nothing compared to him, and that no one can stop his hand or question what he does. Then Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was restored. His honor and splendor returned, and his advisors sought him again. He was restored to his throne and became even greater than before. The king ended his proclamation with praise. "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." And so the mighty king learned that no throne stands higher than God's, and no power is greater than his. Many years passed, and Babylon was now ruled by King Belshazzar, a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. Though the empire still glittered with wealth and power, its heart had grown proud and careless. One night, King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. Wine flowed freely as music echoed through the palace halls. In the midst of the celebration, the king ordered that the gold and silver cups taken from the temple in Jerusalem be brought to him. These were the sacred vessels his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar had stolen from God's house. Belshazzar lifted the holy cups, filled them with wine, and drank from them along with his nobles, wives, and concubines. They praised their gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone, gods that could neither see nor hear nor understand. Then, in the middle of their laughter and feasting, something terrifying happened. A human hand appeared, writing on the plaster wall of the palace near the lampstand. The fingers traced glowing letters across the stone. The king stared at the hand in horror. His face turned pale, his knees knocked together, and his strength left him. Belshazzar cried out for his wise men, astrologers, enchanters, and diviners to come at once. He promised great rewards to anyone who could read the writing and explain its meaning, but none of them could understand the message. Fear filled the banquet hall. Then the queen entered and spoke calmly to the troubled king. "O king, live forever," she said. "There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy God in him. In the days of your father Nebuchadnezzar, he showed wisdom and insight no one else possessed. His name is Daniel." At once, Daniel was summoned. The king offered him purple robes, a gold chain, and high authority if he could explain the writing. But Daniel refused the gifts. He reminded the king of Nebuchadnezzar's story, how God had given him greatness, and how pride had brought him low. He told how Nebuchadnezzar had been humbled until he learned that the Most High God rules over all kingdoms. Then Daniel turned to Belshazzar. "But you, his son, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. You lifted yourself against the Lord of heaven. You drank from his sacred vessels and praised false gods. But you did not honor the God who holds your life in his hands." Then Daniel read the writing on the wall. Emiani, Tekel, Parson, and he gave its meaning. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Parson, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Though the message was terrible, Belshazzar kept his word. He clothed Daniel in purple, placed a gold chain around his neck, and proclaimed him third highest ruler in the kingdom. But that very night, the words were fulfilled. The armies of the Medes and Persians entered Babylon. King Belshazzar was killed, and the great city fell. And so Darius the Mede received the kingdom. Thus ended the reign of Babylon's final king, and the handwriting of God proved true. No empire stands forever, and no pride escapes his judgment. The great empire of Babylon had fallen, and now the Medes and Persians ruled the world. Darius the Mede sat upon the throne, governing a vast kingdom that stretched across many lands and peoples. King Darius reorganized the empire and appointed 120 satraps to rule over the provinces. Over them he placed 3 chief officials to supervise the kingdom, and among these 3 was Daniel. Daniel quickly distinguished himself. Because of his wisdom, integrity, and excellent spirit, he proved himself greater than all the others. The king planned to place Daniel over the entire kingdom, but this stirred jealousy and hatred in the hearts of the other officials. They tried to find fault with Daniel's work. They watched him closely, searching for corruption, dishonesty, or failure, but they could find nothing. Daniel was faithful, trustworthy, and without flaw. At last they said to one another, "We will never find any charge against this man unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So they formed a plot. The officials went together to King Darius and said, "O king, live forever. All the leaders of the kingdom agree that you should issue a royal decree. For the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except you, O king, shall be thrown into the den of lions." They appealed to the king's pride and asked that the law be written and sealed according to the unchangeable law of the Medes and Persians. Unaware of their trap, King Darius signed the decree. Now, when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he did not change his ways. He went to his house, where the windows of his upper room were open toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, just as he had always done, Daniel knelt down and prayed to his God, giving thanks and seeking his help. The officials were watching. They rushed in and caught Daniel praying. Then they went straight to the king. "O king," they said, "did you not sign a decree that anyone who prays to any god or man except you will be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands." Then they said, "Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king. He still prays to his God 3 times a day." When King Darius heard this, he was deeply distressed. He realized he had been tricked. All day long, he tried to find a way to save Daniel. But the law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed. At sunset, the officials returned and reminded the king that no decree he had signed could be revoked. With a heavy heart, King Darius ordered Daniel to be brought. As Daniel was led away, the king said to him, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. A stone was rolled over the entrance, and the king sealed it with his own seal and the seals of his nobles, so that nothing could be changed. That night, King Darius returned to his palace and refused to eat. He sent away his musicians and could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king rushed to the lion's den. With a trembling voice, he called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" From deep within the den came a calm voice. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I done any wrong before you. O king." The king was overjoyed. He ordered Daniel to be lifted from the den. The officials examined him and found no wound on him, not a single scratch, because he had trusted in his God. Then the king commanded that the men who had falsely accused Daniel be thrown into the lion's den, along with their families. Before they reached the bottom, the lions overpowered them and crushed their bones. King Darius then wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language throughout the empire, "Peace be multiplied to you. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." And so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Thus the faithful servant of God stood unshaken before kings, untouched by beasts, and upheld by the hand of the living God, who rules over every kingdom and every throne on earth. In the first year of King Belshazzar's reign over Babylon, Daniel was given a vision from God while lying on his bed at night. As sleep fell upon him, the veil of time was lifted, and the future was revealed in symbols and wonders. When he awoke, Daniel wrote down what he had seen, so that generations to come would know what God had shown him. Daniel saw the great sea churning violently as the four winds of heaven stirred its waters. Out of that restless sea rose four great beasts, each different from the others. The first beast looked like a lion, but it had the wings of an eagle. As Daniel watched, its wings were torn off. It was lifted from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and it was given a human heart. Then a second beast appeared. It looked like a bear, raised up on one side, with 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. A voice commanded it, saying, "Arise, devour much flesh." After this, Daniel saw a third beast, which looked like a leopard. It had 4 wings on its back and 4 heads, and it was given great authority. Then came a fourth beast, terrifying, powerful, and unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It had large iron teeth and crushed and devoured everything in its path. What remained, it trampled under its feet. This beast had 10 horns on its head. As Daniel watched the horns, another small horn rose among them. 3 of the first horns were uprooted to make room for it. This new horn had eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth that spoke proud and boastful words. Daniel's vision then shifted from the beasts of the earth to the throne room of heaven. He saw thrones set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and his hair was pure as wool. His throne was ablaze with fire, and a river of fire flowed from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Daniel continued watching as the boastful horn spoke. Then the fourth beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts were stripped of their authority, though they were allowed to live for a time. Then Daniel saw something even more glorious. Coming with the clouds of heaven was one like a son of man. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. To him was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion was everlasting and would never pass away, and his kingdom would never be destroyed. Though the vision was glorious, it deeply troubled Daniel. His face grew pale, and his thoughts disturbed him. He approached one of the heavenly attendants and asked for the meaning of what he had seen. The angel explained that the 4 beasts represented 4 kingdoms that would rise from the earth. But in the end, the holy people of the Most High would receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Daniel was especially concerned about the 4th beast, the one so different and so terrifying, with iron teeth and bronze claws, and about the 10 horns on its head, and the little horn that rose and spoke with arrogance and made war against God's people. The angel explained that the 4th beast was a 4th kingdom that would appear on earth, different from all the others. The 10 horns were 10 kings who would come from that kingdom. The little horn would rise after them, overthrowing 3 kings. It would speak against the Most High and oppress God's people, trying to change sacred times and laws. But his power would not last forever. The court of heaven would sit in judgment. His authority would be taken away and completely destroyed. Then the kingdom, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven would be given to the people of the Most High. His kingdom would be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers would worship and obey him. The vision ended. Daniel was left shaken and thoughtful. His face remained pale, and his heart was heavy with the weight of what he had seen. Yet he kept these things in his heart, knowing that God had revealed the future, and that in the end, God's kingdom would stand forever. And so Daniel, servant of the Most High, bore witness to a vision of empires rising and falling, of evil judged, and of a kingdom that would never pass away. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, Daniel was given another vision from God. This vision came after the one he had already seen before. And once again, heaven revealed the future in powerful symbols. In the vision, Daniel found himself in the fortress city of Susa in the province of Elam. He was standing beside the Ulai Canal when he looked up and saw a ram standing by the riverbank. The ram had 2 long horns, but one horn was longer than the other, and the longer one had grown later. The ram charged westward, northward, and southward. No animal could stand against it, and none could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became very great. As Daniel watched, suddenly a male goat came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. The goat had a prominent horn between its eyes. It rushed at the ram with furious power and struck it, shattering its 2 horns. The ram had no strength to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled it, and no one could rescue the ram from its power. The goat became very great, but the height of its power, its large horn was broken off. In its place, 4 prominent horns grew toward the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of these horns came a small horn, which grew exceedingly powerful toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. It grew strong enough to challenge the army of heaven. It threw some of the stars to the ground and trampled on them. It set itself up as equal to the prince of the host and took away the daily sacrifice. It cast down the place of God's sanctuary and prospered in rebellion. Daniel then heard 2 holy ones speaking. One asked, "How long will it take for this vision to be fulfilled? The rebellion that causes destruction, the giving over of the sanctuary, and the trampling of God's people." The other replied, "It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be restored." As Daniel tried to understand the vision, suddenly one who looked like a man stood before him. He heard a voice calling out, "Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision." Gabriel came near, and Daniel was so overwhelmed that he fell face down to the ground. But the angel said to him, "Understand, Son of Man, that the vision concerns the time of the end." As Gabriel spoke, Daniel became weak and fell into a deep sleep. Then the angel touched him and helped him stand. Gabriel explained the vision. The ram with 2 horns represented the kings of Media and Persia. The goat represented the king of Greece, and the large horn was its first great king. The 4 horns that replaced it represented 4 kingdoms that would arise from that empire. From one of these kingdoms would come a fierce and cruel ruler, skilled in deceit. He would become very strong, but not by his own power. He would cause great destruction, prosper in everything he did, and destroy mighty men and God's holy people. Through deception, he would grow arrogant and would stand against the Prince of Princes. But he would be destroyed, not by human power. The vision of the 2,300 evenings and mornings was true, but Daniel was told to seal up the vision, because it referred to a time far in the future. The vision left Daniel exhausted and sick for several days. When he recovered, he returned to his duties in the king's service. But he was deeply troubled by what he had seen, for the meaning was overwhelming. And so Daniel carried within his heart a revelation of kingdoms rising and falling, of power misused, of God's people suffering, and of a future ruler who would challenge heaven itself, yet would be brought down by the hand of God. Thus the vision stood as a warning and a promise. Though evil may rise, it will not endure forever, and God's purpose will always stand. In the first year of Darius, son of Xerxes, a Mede by descent who had been made ruler over the Babylonian kingdom, Daniel carefully studied the sacred writings. As he read the words of the prophet Jeremiah, he discovered that Jerusalem's desolation was to last 70 years. When Daniel understood this, his heart was stirred. He turned to the Lord God in prayer, fasting, wearing sackcloth, and sitting in ashes. With humility and sorrow, he sought the face of God on behalf of his people. Daniel prayed. He praised the Lord as the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who obey him. Then he confessed the sins of Israel. He acknowledged that the people had rebelled, turned away from God's commands, ignored his prophets, and brought shame upon themselves. He declared that righteousness belonged to God, but shame covered Israel's face, kings, princes, and people alike. They had sinned, been disloyal, and refused to listen. Even though God had warned them through his servants, they had not repented. Daniel recognized that the disaster that had fallen upon Jerusalem was not accidental. It was written in the law of Moses. The destruction of the city and the exile of the people were the result of their disobedience. Yet Daniel also pleaded for mercy. He asked God to turn away his anger from Jerusalem, his holy city. He begged the Lord to forgive his people, to restore his sanctuary, and to listen to the prayers of his servant. Not because Israel was righteous, but because God is merciful. O Lord, listen. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hear and act. Do not delay, for your city and your people bear your name. While Daniel was still praying, confessing sin and presenting his plea before God, the angel Gabriel, whom Daniel had seen in an earlier vision, came to him swiftly. Gabriel said that from the moment Daniel began to pray, an answer was given, and he had come to explain it, for Daniel was greatly loved. Then Gabriel revealed a message about the future. He said that 77s were decreed for Daniel's people and for the holy city. These were appointed to bring an end to transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Gabriel explained that from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the coming of the Anointed One would be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Jerusalem would be rebuilt, though in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the Anointed One would be cut off and would have nothing. The people of a coming ruler would destroy the city and the sanctuary. War and desolation would follow. A ruler would confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of that 7, he would put an end to sacrifice and offering. On the wing of the temple would come an abomination that causes desolation, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. When Gabriel finished speaking, Daniel understood that God had revealed not only the end of Israel's exile, but also the unfolding of future redemption, suffering, judgment, and restoration. And so Daniel remained in awe, knowing that heaven had heard his prayer, that God had spoken through his messenger, and that the future of nations and kings rests in the hands of the Most High. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, a message that spoke of great conflict and suffering yet to come. Daniel understood that the message was true and that it concerned a great war in the future. At that time, Daniel entered a season of deep mourning. For 3 full weeks, he ate no rich food, tasted no meat or wine, and did not anoint himself with oil. His heart was burdened, and he sought understanding from God with fasting and prayer. On the 24th day of the 1st month, Daniel was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris. As he looked up, he saw a vision that took his breath away. Before him stood a glorious man. The man was dressed in fine linen, with a belt of pure gold around his waist. His body shone like precious stone. His face flashed like lightning. His eyes burned like flames of fire. His arms and legs gleamed like polished bronze, and his voice sounded like the roar of a great crowd. Daniel alone saw the vision. The men with him did not see the figure, but a great fear fell upon them. and they fled and hid themselves. Daniel was left trembling and weak. His strength left him, his face grew pale, and he fell face down to the ground. Then he heard the voice of the glorious man. As the voice spoke, Daniel fell into a deep sleep with his face to the earth. But a hand touched him and set him trembling on his hands and knees. The heavenly messenger spoke gently. Daniel, you are greatly loved. Consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you. Stand up, for I have now been sent to you. Daniel stood, still shaking. The messenger told him that from the first day Daniel had humbled himself and set his heart on understanding. His prayer had been heard in heaven. But the answer had been delayed for 21 days because the prince of the kingdom of Persia had opposed him. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help, and the messenger was finally able to reach Daniel. He explained that he had come to reveal what would happen to Daniel's people in the days to come, for the vision concerned the future. As the messenger spoke, Daniel lowered his face to the ground, unable to speak. Then one who looked like a man touched his lips, and Daniel was able to speak again. With weakness in his voice, Daniel said, "My Lord, I am overcome with anguish because of the vision, and I feel helpless. How can I speak with you when I have no strength left?" Again, the glorious being touched Daniel and gave him strength. "Do not be afraid," he said. "You are greatly loved. Peace be with you. Be strong now. Be strong." And as the messenger spoke, strength returned to Daniel. Daniel said, "Speak, my Lord, since you have given me strength." The messenger then explained that he must soon return to continue fighting against the prince of Persia, and that afterward the prince of Greece would come. But before leaving, he would tell Daniel what was written in the book of truth. He told Daniel that no one supports him against these spiritual powers except Michael, the great prince who protects Daniel's people. And so the chapter ends with Daniel standing on the edge of a great revelation, aware now that unseen battles rage behind the events of human history, and that heaven itself moves in response to the prayers of God's faithful servant. Thus Daniel learned that while kings rule on earth, the Lord reigns in heaven, and his purposes will surely stand. The heavenly messenger who had come to Daniel now continued speaking, opening before him a long and detailed vision of the future, one filled with wars, betrayals, rising empires, and falling kings. The messenger first spoke of the Persian Empire. He said that 3 more kings would arise in Persia, followed by a 4th who would be far richer and more powerful than the others. This king would stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king would arise, strong and powerful, ruling with great authority. But at the height of his power, his kingdom would be broken and divided into 4 parts, spread toward the 4 winds of heaven. Yet his kingdom would not remain with his descendants, nor would it hold the same strength it once had. From this broken empire would rise 2 major powers, the king of the south, the king of the north. And between these 2 kingdoms, generations of conflict would unfold. The king of the south would grow strong, but one of his commanders would become even stronger and rule a great dominion. An alliance would be formed through marriage, but it would not last. Betrayal would follow, and blood would be spilled. War would rise again. A prince from the south would attack the north and succeed. But in time, the north would strike back with a massive army. The 2 kingdoms would clash again and again, neither side gaining lasting peace. The people of God would be caught in the middle. As kingdoms rose and fell, God's people would suffer violence and oppression. Some would stumble, others would stand firm and remain faithful. Many would be refined and purified through hardship. Then the messenger described a particularly powerful and ruthless ruler. This king would do as he pleased. He would exalt himself above every god and speak against the God of gods. He would honor a God of fortresses and trust in military power. He would reward those who supported him and divide lands among them. He would invade many nations, sweeping through them like a flood. He would enter the beautiful land, and many would fall before him. Yet some lands would escape his hand. He would grow rich and powerful, controlling treasures of gold and silver. But rumors from the east and the north would trouble him, and he would march out in great fury to destroy many. At the height of his power, he would set up his royal tents between the seas and the holy mountain. Yet his end would come suddenly, and no one would help him. Thus the chapter closes with a sweeping vision of history before it ever happened. Kings rising and falling, empires clashing, ambition and pride ruling hearts, and God's people standing in the center of it all, tested, refined, and preserved. Through it all, one truth remains clear. Earthly kingdoms may fight for power, but heaven alone controls the course of history. And Daniel, servant of the Most High, stood in awe as the future unfolded before his eyes, written already in the book of truth. As the heavenly messenger finished revealing the long vision of future kingdoms and wars, he turned Daniel's attention to the final chapter of God's great plan, a time unlike any the world had ever known. The messenger spoke of a coming age of great trouble. He said that in those days, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the people of Israel, would rise to protect them. But the time ahead would be a time of distress such as had never occurred since nations first came into existence. It would be a period of great upheaval, trial, and suffering for the world. Yet in the midst of that terrible time, a promise was given. God's people would be delivered, everyone whose name was found written in the book. Then Daniel was shown a vision of something even greater. He was told that many who sleep in the dust of the earth would awaken, some to everlasting life, and others to shame and everlasting contempt. The dead would rise, and eternal destinies would be revealed. Those who were wise, who had lived in faithfulness and led others to righteousness, would shine like the brightness of the heavens. They would shine like stars forever and ever. Daniel was then commanded to seal up the words of the prophecy until the time of the end. Knowledge would increase, and many would search for understanding. Daniel looked and saw two others standing, one on each side of the river. One of them asked the man clothed in linen, who stood above the waters, "How long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled?" The glorious messenger lifted his hands toward heaven and swore by the one who lives forever. He declared that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the power of God's holy people had been finally broken, all these things would be completed. Daniel listened, but he did not fully understand. So he asked, "My lord, what will be the outcome of all this?" The messenger answered gently, "Go your way, Daniel. The words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined. The wicked will continue in wickedness and will not understand, but the wise will understand." He spoke of a specific period beginning with the removal of daily sacrifice and the setting up of the abomination that causes desolation. There would be 1,290 days, and blessed would be those who wait and reach the 1,335 days. Then came the final words spoken to Daniel. The messenger told him to go his way until the end. Daniel would rest, and then at the end of the days, he would rise again to receive his inheritance. And so the great book closes. Daniel, the faithful servant of God, who had served under kings and seen empires rise and fall, was given a vision of the end of all things, of resurrection, judgment, reward, and eternal life. Thus ends the story of a man who stood firm in faith, who prayed when others bowed, who trusted God when kingdoms trembled, and who was shown that no matter how dark the world becomes, God's kingdom will stand forever. And so the story of Daniel comes to an end. A young exile taken from his homeland, carried into a foreign empire, and placed in the courts of powerful kings. Surrounded by false gods, threatened by death, and tested by fire and beasts, Daniel never turned away from the Lord. He stood when others bowed. He prayed when prayer was forbidden. He trusted God when kingdoms rose and fell. Through dreams and visions, God revealed the future to him, a future filled with wars, empires, suffering, and final judgment. Daniel saw kings rise and fall like dust in the wind, but he also saw a kingdom that would never pass away. He saw beasts that ruled with terror. He saw rulers who walked in pride. He saw a Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, and he saw a kingdom given to the people of the Most High. Daniel's life proves that faith can survive in any empire, that obedience is stronger than fear, and that no power on earth can stand against the will of God. The lions were silenced. The fire did not burn. The handwriting was written on the wall, and the proud were brought low, but the faithful were lifted up. And in the end, Daniel was shown that history is not ruled by kings. It is ruled by God, and the kingdom of the Most High will stand forever.